Notice is hereby given that a special meeting of the Laramie City Council will be held Tuesday, December 13th, 2022 at 6:00 p.m. via Zoom for the following purpose. Special meeting item number 1, temporary use of an Albany County retail liquor license for Albany Lodge LLC within city limits for an event on December 16th, 2022 at the Laramie Railroad Train Depot. The agenda materials may be found at www.cityoflaramie.org/agenda center for the Friday before the meeting. Regularly scheduled work session will follow.
Great, thanks, Nancy. Let's go ahead and see if we have any public comments on non-agenda items for this special meeting. Okay, I don't see any. Let's go ahead and maybe Councilor Schuster, are you ready to go? Could you read the item number 1B?
Vice Mayor, point of order. Do we need to do roll call since it's a special meeting?
You know, I don't see that on the agenda, but Nancy, what do you think? Should we do a roll call real quick?
Yeah, roll call would be great. Vice Mayor, thank you.
Go ahead, let's do roll call.
Cumby.
Here.
Gabriel.
Here.
Harrington. Absent. O'Doherty.
Here.
Schmeckel.
Here.
Schuster.
Here.
Somerville.
Here.
Pierce.
Here.
Weaver. Absent. That's 7 present and 2 absent, Your Honor.
Thank you. So, Councilor Schuster, are you ready to go with 1B?
Yes, I am. The title is temporary. Okay, the temporary use of the Albany County retail liquor license for Albany Lodge LLC within the city limits for an event on December 16th, 2022 at the Laramie Railroad Train Depot. I move that the City Council approve the temporary use of an Albany County retail liquor license for Albany Lodge LLC within the city limits for the alcohol catering permit on December 16, 2022 at the Laramie Railroad Train Depot for the Christmas party.
Second.
Great, thanks. Second by Councilor Schmeckel. Did I hear that right? Okay, great, thanks. Nancy, you want to go ahead and give us the background on this?
Sure. Thank you, Vice Mayor. The item before you tonight is a request similar to what we've received in the past, where an retail liquor license holder from outside of Laramie city limits has requested to apply for an alcohol catering permit for a temporary event. So this one is on December 16th at the train depot. And so the county commissioners have given us, the county clerk's office has given us provisional approval for issuing this alcohol catering permit. Per state statute, we have to have approval of the commissioners and the city council. So that's what is before you tonight. So with that, Vice Mayor, if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Great. Does anybody have any questions? Boy, let's go to the attendees and see if they have any questions on this particular agenda item. I don't see any. Let's go for a vote if we could. Nancy?
Cumby.
Yes.
Gabriel.
Yes.
Harrington. Absent. O'Doherty.
Yes.
Schmeckel.
Yes.
Schuster.
Yes.
Somerville.
Yes.
Pierce.
Yes.
Weaver.
Yes.
That's 8 yeses, 0 noes, and 1 absent, Your Honor.
Great. And Councilor Schuster, you want to go ahead and adjourn us out of our special meeting?
I moved we adjourn from our special meeting and take care of regular work session business tonight.
Second. Great, thanks. We don't need to vote on this. We can just adjourn, right?
Yeah, you could do unanimous consent or all in favor. They could say aye or raise their hands.
Okay, all in favor say aye.
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 Okay, perfect. Let's move on to the work session and we'll let the mayor take over the meeting. How's that?
Thanks, Vice Mayor, for the,
Mayor, are you ready to go here?
I am. Thanks, Vice Mayor, for chairing the special meeting and getting the liquor license taken care of. So, for the work session, we have got, first a public comment period. And so we will open up the public comment period. I think we had a request for public comment from the city clerk. Someone had contacted them. I don't know if that's on the work session topic, and if folks want to wait to make comment on the work session topic after we have the presentation.
Mayor,
After
I apologize.
That's all right.
The request was for work session topics, Mayor.
All right. So, well, if there isn't anybody that wants to make comment on during the non-work session topic period, then we'll close the non-topical public comment and get into the work session topic, and then we'll have the public comment period after that. So, we'll open the work session now for staff for background and presentations.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll start off and introduce our Natural Resource Administrator. But Council, it has become, I should say, customary for us to come to you at the end of our agricultural season and provide kind of an overview of the agricultural season out at the city's Monolith Ranch. As you know, we have owned that ranch for decades, going back to 1981. We operate that ranch in order to preserve the water right, the Dallin water right in the Laramie River that comes with that property, so that there is the potential in the future to convert that agricultural water right to a municipal water right to support the city as it grows into future decades. This year, we will be augmenting what has been our kind of historical ag season wrap-up with not only a look at the Monolith Ranch, but also talking to you about how the agricultural season, our inaugural agricultural season, panned out at the recently acquired Bath Ranch property, which the city purchased in June and officially took ownership of on July 1st. And then as a third topic tonight, Darren Parkin and I had talked, and we thought it might be timely as well to add a third topic to the discussion, which is to give you a quick update on our Dallin fish, I can't say this, fish passage project. There we go. And so Darren will walk us through that once we hear from our Monolith and Bath Ranch presenters. Darren's going to introduce them and give you a little bit more background on those ag operations this season. And then I think he'll also provide opportunity for you to ask questions throughout the presentation. So Darren?
Yeah, thanks, Janine, and good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm going to start out with just kind of a quick overview. I have a few slides, and then as Janine said, we will turn this over to the ranch manager, Zach Iddings, for the Monolith Ranch and Bear Livestock. JD Mathis will be representing the Bath Ranch operations for 2022 with the Kite Ranch and Wildtech. And then Justin Terfair is an engineer with WWC, who has been working on the Dallin project, the Diversion Dam Fish Passage project. He's going to finish up our evening for us. So I guess we can go to the first slide. And many of you know all of this, so I'm not going to go into super deep detail. And I'm not going to go clear back to the 1860s on this talk. I'm going to start in the 1970s. When the city purchased the Monolith Ranch, the city bought this ranch for the water rights, and it was specifically for 20 cubic feet per second of the Dallin water right, which is the #1 water right on the Laramie River. The state of Wyoming follows the prior appropriation doctrine, so first in time is first in right. So in an over-appropriated drainage such as the Laramie River system that's heavily regulated, junior users are regulated off to the benefit of senior users. So if the more senior the water right, the more valuable it is. #1 right is the most valuable right, and one that is the best to invest in as a municipality. to transfer from agricultural to municipal use. So the catalyst to this was Laramie was partnered with Cheyenne on the Stage 2 pipeline project in the 70s. That didn't work out. Depending on who you talk to, it was Laramie's fault or Cheyenne's fault. I'm not sure. But that kind of left the folks in charge of the community at that time worried about their future water supply. And so about that time, the Monolith Portland Cement Company went into bankruptcy. They offered the Monolith Ranch with the Dallin water rights for the city at $1 million if they could close in 90 days. The city said yes. It was approved by some financing that was provided by the state of Wyoming. At the time, they were involved in ag lending. However, it was very controversial back then, the idea of government or a municipality owning an agricultural property. So the city was actually sued twice back then. It was a big process. And eventually it went to the popular vote of the citizens, which passed with about an 80% approval rate. So it was a vocal, but small minority that was against the purchase. So the city eventually got the Monolith bought in 1981, but the purchase price had increased by then to $3 million. Original size was about 13,000 acres, and now it's down to about 11,000 as some of the land has been traded and sold off over time. So that brings us to the next slide, which, as the city manager mentioned, June of 22, this summer, the city purchased the Bath Ranch that came on the market. And that was for an additional 10 cubic feet per second of that Dallin water right. The Bath Ranch in its entirety, 8,200 acres. The city did not buy it all. We purchased 4,600 acres of that. Again, it was for the Dallin water right. We have a website, and that website is listed on this slide. All this information is there, and we are in the process of updating the website through an intern project, so it should be even better here in the near future. But I know this information has been presented to you, and you're all pretty familiar with this, but just wanted to bring that up to everybody's attention again. If anybody wants to talk Bath Ranch or dive into details, it's there, or you can contact me at any time. One important thing to mention that we had a cross-contingent closing with the Conservation Fund. The city could not afford to buy the entire Bath property. So we found a partner, the Conservation Fund, who purchased the other half, which is over on the Sand Creek drainage. That is a very valuable piece of property because it contains #1 water rights, 1871 water rights on Sand Creek. And the plan of the Conservation Fund is to eventually sell their acquisition to the Fish and Wildlife Service. And I'll show a slide that kind of shows where those lands lie here in a minute. Next slide, please. So, and again, if anybody has any questions, just let me know, but this is just the general orientation of where we're talking. The green up above, that's the city limits, corporate limits of the city of Laramie. The blue is the Monolith, and then that orange color is the Bath Ranch. Now that shows the Bath Ranch, it's in its 8,200 acre entirety. The city did not buy all of that, but you can see where it all lies in relation to the city of Laramie. It's just right upstream, it's close to town. And the size, I mean, these properties are both about the size of the corporate limits of the city of Laramie itself. So to the next slide, shows in greater detail what the city actually acquired. So in purple and green there, you see the existing Monolith. The city actually bought the yellow portion. And the part that we really wanted was up north. That's where the Dallin water rights are. Water rights in Wyoming attached to the land. So in order to control a water right, you have to own the property that water right is attached to. As part of the purchase process, we also acquired what we are calling the southern lands, which is about 2,200 acres of property, the two southern pieces. And we're still developing a management plan for those and what the future for those holds. But that's the property that the city has. And if you go to the next slide, please. On the left there in the red, that shows the part of the Bath Ranch that the Conservation Fund bought and are in the process of transferring, selling to the Fish and Wildlife Service. This transfer is on track, as I understand it. Obviously, that's a very complicated thing in the federal process, but I think that they are ahead of schedule from where they thought they would be. They're very excited about it. They are using Wyoming toad endangered species money to purchase this. It will be an expansion of the Hutton Lake Refuge. I believe they might be using a little bit of refuge money as well. but this red area is really where they're going to focus. It's going to become the core area that they're going to focus their reintroduction efforts for the Wyoming toad to try to get a viable wild breeding population of the toads. And so they're already making a lot of plans on how they're going to manage that. They will have agriculture on that property too, because the Wyoming toads they kind of have a symbiotic relationship with grazing animals. So they will have some grazing and things and agricultural opportunity, operations over there. But it's primarily going to be a wildlife conservation endangered species property. On the right, sorry, Nancy, on the right, it is just a water rights map. It's just a bunch of stuff, doesn't make much sense, but it just shows how many water rights are attached to this property. It was a huge amount. This ranch was very unique, and then it had #1 water rights from 2 separate drainages. Again, the stuff to the north is what the city had the most interest in, but you see all those water rights over on the Sand Creek property that the Fish and Wildlife Service will acquire with all those 1871 Sand Creek water rights. So it's a very valuable ranch in those regards. Now, next slide. And this is the actual Dallin ditch. Kind of gives a breakdown of the water rights that are in there. There's still a small portion, 1.81 cubic feet per second of the Dallin the city does not control. It's owned by the McKinsey Ranch, but the vast majority of the Dallin water now is controlled by the city of Laramie. And so the next slide. Now, the water transfer is a very complicated topic, and we could go on and on about that. I'm not going to dive into huge detail with this. We don't know when the actual transfer from municipal to agricultural use is going to take place. I say at least 20 years out. I'm guessing that it's going to be significantly out further than that. At least that's what we're planning on at this time. It's dependent upon a lot of factors, right? Water use in the city, right? City growth, our groundwater, as long as it's still available and we don't have any contamination issues. Future groundwater development, we may be drilling groundwater prospects first before we engage into this surface water transfer. And of course, the current water treatment plant, which had some upgrades a few years ago, it's not going to last forever. That was built back in 1964, 63, I think. And so, it's eventually going to need to be replaced, and that might be also a catalyst of transferring all or a portion of this water. Now, the consumptive use plan, again, not to take a deep dive into this whole process, but the consumptive use, we're only going to be allowed to transfer from agricultural to municipal use the amount of water that we're actually using. And so that is a very complicated thing that's kind of mandated by the state of Wyoming. The current plan that we're operating under, the framework, was developed back in 2004. We have a RFQ that was advertised to come in and update this plan for us. We actually have some consultant interviews on that this week on Thursday morning. And so we'll get that hopefully in front of you guys and under contract in January, your first or second meeting in January, and get that process going over the next year or so to come up with a plan to make sure we're tracking with the state of Wyoming and our expectations and our irrigation activities and our data collection. And all that's going to be really scrutinized heavily over the next 12-month period. So eventually, excuse me, Nancy. So eventually, as we get closer to the transfer of this consumptive use plan, is really kind of to get us the next 20 years down the road. It isn't the plan that we're actually going to use to actually transfer the water. When we get about 10 years away from where we think the actual transfer is going to take place, we will put together, that's when the rubber meets the road, and we'll put together a very complex plan to actually accomplish the transfer, which will probably eventually change some irrigation practices and some things that we currently do. But the overall goal with what we're doing out there is we feel like we have enough water sitting on those ranches to double the size of Laramie. So it's a pretty comfortable place that we're in right now to know, with so many communities around us being water short, to feel like we have a very robust water rights portfolio to facilitate a lot of growth and the existence of Laramie into the future. So the next slide. This is a very expensive endeavor. A lot of things we do don't make any sense from an agricultural standpoint, but from a municipal water rights project, they do. And so I just kind of threw this slide out. It's a little bit out of date. It's showing 2020 numbers with current real estate prices and interest rates. This is probably a little low. So in Colorado, northern Colorado Front Range, most communities are out of water or running out of water. They have tremendous growth down there, and they don't know how they're going to fuel that growth. In Colorado, water rights do not attach to the land, so you can own water rights and not actually have to own any physical property. They go through water courts. You can go in and buy water rights. The water courts in 2020 had $60 million in sales. One of the major projects, it was a Federal Bureau of Rec project that has fueled a lot of that municipal growth in northern Colorado, was the Big Thompson project, the Big T. That's the big pipeline that you drive under at the dam store when you're headed up Estes Park. That was originally built in the 1950s for farming, agriculture. Now that water pretty much all goes to municipalities. A share of the Big Thompson is basically when is a little less than an acre foot, and in 2020 those shares were selling for about $80,000 an acre foot, and they're really not available anymore. So in Laramie, if a developer wants to come in, they pay their tap fees and we hook them into our system. In Colorado, if a developer wants to come in, these communities don't have water to facilitate that growth. So not only do they have to pay those fees, they also have to go find water and bring water into the community to build their developments in a lot of cases. And so if you look at a typical home in Colorado, $42,500 of that purchase price is what it took that developer to go out on the market and acquire the water rights and bring it into that municipality to build that subdivision. I'm seeing current numbers now where that's up to about $60,000 per house just to acquire the water rights. So the spiel of this is, yes, these ranches are expensive. Yes, we get that, but in the overall scheme, and these communities are not very far from us, and this growth is not very far from us. It's worth it. You know, if this ranch, if these ranches were located down in Colorado, I mean, we're looking at 60 million, 70, 80 million. I'm not sure what just the water rights alone would be selling for at current prices. So it's a very valuable thing that the city now owns. So the next slide, please. So what the city's done over on the Bass since we required it in June is we're kind of looking at a lot of different management options and seeing what's available to us to kind of formulate a framework of how we want to operate this. We do want to open it up to the public as much as feasible and practical, river access and hunting access and maybe other types of access. And there is potentially some historical components to it. This contains part of the buildings from the Big Laramie River Overland Trail stage stop. And so we've had some University of Wyoming folks come out and do some field inspections. The building at the bottom is the mechanic shop / blacksmith building that was built sometime probably, they think, in the 1870s. We've had game and fish folks out walking the river, doing assessments of the riparian habitat, looking at potential public access for anglers along the river. They are going to be doing some fish counting in there in the spring. And we're talking to them about partnerships and funding models for that. The ranch needed quite a bit of irrigation infrastructure repair. The Kite Ranch folks, which you'll hear from later this evening, have done a lot of that. We've also worked with Hammaker Construction and city staff to get some of that done too. That head gate in this picture, that's a new installation that was put in by some city staff. We've done some really cool, or the city engineering department has done some really great mapping and drone flights of the property to archive what we've got, the current conditions when we acquired it. And it's really helped kind of give us some assessments of what we've got. Access easements are ongoing, working with Conservation Fund. Hay meadow evaluations, we've worked with Laramie Rivers Conservation District on that. NRCS has come into the picture. Traditionally, the city of Laramie as a municipality has not been eligible for NRCS federal money, but that has changed. And so we have the opportunity for some pretty nice partnerships there. Helena is a fertilizing company that we've talked to about the fertilizer plan. And then we've done some perimeter surveys through WWC. We've got a lot of fencing that we're trying to line out, and that fencing will be expensive. And so we're hoping to work with NRCS and Game and Fish and Fish and Wildlife Service potentially to cost share some wildlife-friendly perimeter fencing around the ranch. So that's really kind of been the city's focus on the Bath to date. And so the next slide. So we have some ongoing challenges. One is the hunter management area, on the left there, where you kind of see the crosshatch. That was parts of the Bath Ranch that used to be in that monolith hunter management area. We do have some access issues with the public that need to be worked through. The hope is to put the majority, if not all, of city property in this hunter management area. But we have to work through some issues with BLM and work through some issues with potentially Mountain Cement to really be able to get the public in there to do that. And then on the right, we inherited with this purchase about 800 acres of BLM grazing lease, the Bessie Bath grazing allotment. That has been a little bit difficult. The city attorney is working diligently on this one. We've had a lot of conversations and talks with them. Traditionally, a municipality would not be able to hold necessarily one of their grazing leases, but I think that we have a good working relationship with them, and we're going to find a way to be able to manage that property, whether it's as a grazing lease or a recreational type lease or something. And, you know, we've got a lot of interest from Game and Fish, a lot of interest from Fish and Wildlife, Conservation Fund, and others to maybe help us out there. So those are kind of ongoing things that need to be put together on these properties that are still being worked on. And so the next one, I wanted to mention the Ranch Advisory Committee. The Ranch Advisory Committee is currently having their bylaws reworked. That committee was formed in 2008 as an ad hoc committee that was kind of formed to put together a report for city council. And then I think the intention was for them to essentially be disbanded, but they never were. And so they've kind of been meeting outside of their bylaws for many, many years. So we're cleaning that up. We're taking the reference to Monolith out of their name so that they can also advise on the Bath Ranch and any future ag properties that the city acquires. And we're also kind of defining their duties and responsibilities to better fit where we're at in the current day, since it's not 2008 anymore. City clerk has worked up some of those. I've looked at them, and the city manager and city attorney are working on that as well. So you might see some changes for the Ranch Advisory Committee bylaws come through early next year. And so my final slide before I turn this over is going to be ranch leases. We are not talking leases this evening. This is just going to be operational overviews from Bear and from Mathis, but it's coming right around the corner. We hope to have the RFP out spring of 2023, probably needs to be early spring of 2023. Both ranches are going to be advertised for leases separately but concurrently. We hope to have this process buttoned up for both properties in July of 23. The reason for that is Bear Livestock really needs to have a 12-month notice, whether they're staying or going, and we're going to have a standing hay crop on the Bass side that somebody's going to have to come in and put up. So this is going to be a very big process. I think you'll probably see some things come your way in 2023 concerning the grazing leases and haying leases. So the Monolith Ranch is a cattle lease. It's a cattle ranching operation. We anticipate that to continue. The Bath Ranch has a little bit different constraints on it because of the way it was purchased using tax-free municipal bonds. We probably aren't at this time going to be looking at bringing cattle onto that property. It would be a haying lease only, at least until those bonds are paid off, which I'm hearing are 6 to 8 years from now. So they'll be a little bit different how those two are structured. The Bath Ranch is going to need to be reviewed by bond attorneys and tax attorneys and anything that we do there. So that one will be a little more tricky, and it's the first one we've done on that side. So there might be a few more moving pieces there. So with that, hopefully that kind of lays the groundwork with where things are at on the city side. And if nobody has any questions, I think I'll just turn it over to Zach. Okay.
Yeah, I don't think you're going to be off the hook that easy. Unfortunately, Mr. Parkin, let's start with Councilmember Schuster.
Thank you. Never got to go take that tour of the Bath Ranch late this fall. Just wondered if, even though I'm going off council, if I can contact you next year, probably late in the season where not everything's flooding out there, and maybe still get a tour.
Yes, I'm always happy to give tours, and I know we're going to have some new faces on council in January, and I think it would be great to get them out to see everything. And I don't know if many of you have seen the Bass side at all. So yeah, I mean, if whether you're on council or not, give lots of tours, happy to take you out anytime. So,
And I think I could probably talk Wyotech into it too, so you never know.
sounds great to me.
Other questions for Mr. Parkang? Well, while you're thinking of some of your questions, I'll ask one. Darren, I hope this isn't too far out of the scope of what we're doing tonight. I want to ask you about flows that we're seeing from the Laramie River and ask you if you, I believe you keep tabs on those kinds of things, but I wonder what those look like to the best of your knowledge in the last couple of years compared to historic flows that we've seen out of there. Is that something that's in your wheelhouse as our natural resource manager?
Yeah, I do keep tabs on that. I would say the last few years have been average flows, but nothing, spectacular. This year we had kind of that second peak that kind of caught me off surprise. It caught me off guard. I didn't really expect that. I did have something put together here. So I would say that this last year was pretty much what we would call an average year. On a normal year, whatever that is, we see about a 1,500 or 1,600 cubic feet per second peak at the gauge at Woods Landing, and that's right where we were at. Previous years, we were in the 1,100, 1,200, 1,600 range. If you go back to 2019, we had an above average year. So I don't think that our flows are necessarily a drought stage, if that's what you're getting at. We haven't seen that yet. We saw that prolonged drought that kind of broke back in 2002. We had some good years in the like 96, 97, 98. And then it really got dry. And if you go back to those flow years, it was really, really low. I think 2002, it was like a 20-some% snowpack or 30-some% snowpack. We're not seeing anything like that. I would say it's just very average. One thing that we haven't got, we had some rain this year, but a lot of times if you don't get the rain to supplement the river flows, then the higher hay meadows and things just don't grow because, our fields aren't very level. And so we kind of have to fill the low spots to flood the high spots. But the river flows have not been terrible, and the timing hasn't changed too much either. With the burn areas and things and losing that cover, the thought is that the snowpack would come off faster, but we haven't seen it drastically be faster. What we see is more drought related. So if you have a really low snowpack that tends to come off earlier in the year, and a heavier snowpack, or if you're getting that late spring moisture, it comes out later in the year. So I don't know. It's every year's different, but I would say they're fairly average. I mean, we're looking at, last year was 104% of average. The year before that was 90%. The year before that was 105. The year before that was 94%. So we're kind of hanging right in there with the running 30-year average the last few years.
I got to say that's pretty good news because the state as a whole, I understand, is in year whatever it is of drought. So that's good news. You mentioned 2019. My understanding is that was an exceptionally wet year for the whole state, including here in Albany County, and it was a little bit of an outlier for what we've been experiencing recently. And the reason I'm asking this question is because, we're seeing these kinds of concerns all over the place in the region, right? In the West, the Rocky Mountain West, and certainly down the Southwest. What we're hearing about is drought, water demand, and drought. So it's encouraging to hear that we're still sitting at what I guess we characterize as average flows. I don't know when set from when, I'm not sure. You mentioned some of the it's 1990s, but I'm not sure when the average was established. I imagine you do have that information, but that's not bad news. It's good news that we're still seeing what we consider to be average flows there. But I think that's something we really need to pay really close attention to, because as we're talking about transition of water rights 10, 20 years from now, I think it would be a good idea to have some projections in mind for what that might be. I don't know. I wonder if it'll be the same in 10 years. And I definitely wonder if it'll be the same in 20 years in terms of CFS out of the Laramie River by the time the community might be looking at using it for municipal drinking water resource. And I don't think that's unreasonable to raise as a topic for consideration down the road. I don't know what steps, if any, the city could take, well, bearing that in mind, but it seems like something that the Laramie city government should be concerned with moving forward. Because unfortunately, I don't see that situation improving in terms of water scarcity.
Yeah, Mayor, the overall future projections are down, a downward trend in the west for snowpack. I guess that's why the number one right is so important, because unless the river goes dry, I mean, you can still pull your water, but the river has gone dry. In 2002, it did go dry up at our municipal intake. So, you know, I think we're kind of, while we don't have climate forecasting built into our future planning yet, we're kind of dealing with that with a robust water rights portfolio, right? So that's why the CASP are so important, both quantity and quality, and who's in it and who isn't, right? And that's you know why it's important to have this water right. So we're right now we think maybe we've got 100 years worth of water, but if we see some real severe droughts come in, maybe that's 50 or 40 years. So I think you know it's important to keep a very robust water rights portfolio. Just to kind of hedge your bets. And I've talked to the city manager about this, about some other concerns that she has with climate change and some of these changes. And I know that other communities with their municipal water rights portfolios, they are incorporating climate change into that in reduced amounts of supply. And so that's perhaps something that we should take a look at as well. And I would say that the average on the snowpack, that's a 30-year running average. So it's just compared to the last 30. So when, you know, the late 70s, early 80s were some tremendous snow years, kind of, I don't know, 78, 77 to like 84 were way above average. So when those dropped off of the 30-year running average, 100% snowpack didn't mean the same thing because it was actually a significantly less amount of snow on the hill. And so as the last 30 years has overall trended down, you know, that's where we're hanging in with that, but you can't, you know, it really kind of depends on what's happened in that 30-year window. And that 30-year running average is established by the federal government, is kind of how they do their snowcast forecasting. So if you looked at it from, I think the first year that this stuff was tracked on the Big Laramie River was like 1912. If you took a look at that all the way back to 1912, these snowpack totals might not be close to 100%. They might be lower. So, you know, it depends on the length of the data you're looking at.
I really appreciate your willingness to provide us some information and answer some questions on that topic, because I think that's going to be an important thing for the city to be doing moving forward, is to keep all of that in mind when we're talking about decisions around our ranch management and as you described it, the water portfolio, because I think it needs to be looked at exactly that way, as an asset portfolio, but it's a little bit like a lot of those, it's a little bit volatile because we may not be able to what did you call it, forecasting as well as we'd like, but maybe starting to take a look at doing more of that when we talk about ranch management. We should be maybe taking a look at different scenarios and different projections based on different types of climate scenarios with regard to how much water there's going to be, because I think there's an understanding, whether it's a good understanding or not, that, well, you know, we're great for water in Laramie because we've done a good job of pursuing water rights on the Laramie River, and we have this aquifer resource, but at the same time, what are we basing that understanding on? Are we basing that understanding on historic water availability that may not be what it is 20 years from now that it is today. I don't know. I think these are the kinds of conversations and questions that we should be concerning ourselves with. And I really appreciate you touching on that and addressing it a little bit. I think that conversation needs to stay alive, and as more information becomes available, it needs to be part of all these discussions. So thanks.
Mhm.
Thank you very much, because there aren't that many opportunities to dig into this topic. So any other questions for Mr. Parkin? I know we have, yes, Councilmember Cumby.
It's not a question. I was just going to make a comment. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay. Just coming in on what you're saying, Mr. Mayor. There was on KUNC Public Radio in Colorado. They had a special report related to water, where they were talking about the Thornton situation. And 30 years ago, they began buying up ranches to obtain water rights, planning for the future, which is what you're talking about. I do not think that they anticipated the growth of Fort Collins. And now that water is north of Fort Collins, and they are unable to get the rights to run the pipe to tap the water that they bought 25 years ago. And so it really shows that even though they were forward thinking, they have water that they cannot tap into and bring into Thornton because they can't get the permit to lay the pipe that they would need. So other considerations are coming up now that they would actually pump it into the Poudre River and then take it out downstream. But they're estimating that that cost would be about $1 billion. So this is very serious, and I would suggest it's maybe about a little 5-minute report, but extremely informative, and you all may want to take a listen to that online at KUNC. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Cumby. If you can find the link, please pass it along.
I'll do that.
Yeah, Mayor, through you, that City of Thornton purchased the majority of water rights from the Poudre Tunnel 20 or 30 years ago. And they purchased the farms, I think, that were irrigated by those. So a lot of the farms that you have seen over the last 20 or 30 years down in that part of Fort Collins were owned by the City of Thornton. They just leased them back until they needed the water. And now they're drying those farms up. Those are going to houses, and the water's going all the way down to North Denver. It does show the complexity and the value of the water. The Poudre Tunnel takes 38,000 acre feet right off the top of the Laramie River every year through the Colorado the Laramie River decree. So while we say we have the #1 priority water right, it's really the #1 priority water right in Wyoming. Colorado takes off the headwaters a big chunk. And that's a real double whammy for us during drought years, because they get their full diversion amount. Whether they don't have to take less on a low snowpack. They take their full amount every year. And like I say, the vast majority of water that's coming right out of our headwaters is slated to go to North Denver. So if they can figure out, it's so complicated down there, and I know they're blocking some of the construction, Fort Collinses and things, but those stories are all over the place, and it's really a nasty, high stakes, high dollar deal. And we're only 70 miles from that, and we're actually closer. Cheyenne's got some problems too. So, or at least we're in a good place now. You're right, Mayor. You need to keep your eye on the ball. You can't be complacent. This is kind of a slow moving train, but you have to make sure it stays on the tracks, and you have to make sure you're realistic with what you're getting. And you always have to be careful of who else is eyeballing things. And it's important. And that's why I think it's important to bring this in front of council every couple years or so. And we all just need to make sure we're aware of where we're at and what's going on, because it's a very competitive game, the water business is, and it's getting more competitive all the time. It's not going to ever get any easier to find municipal water in the West.
Absolutely. Absolutely agree, and I think I wanted to get into this line of discussion a little bit because I think from now on, more so than it has been, I think we always have had these issues in mind, but I think moving forward, we always need to contextualize our discussions about water management issues in Laramie this way, because as you said, it's not going to go away. I think we all suspect it's going to get more intense, and I think it's good to have that context of what's going on in Colorado with red growth, what's going on everywhere else with increasingly scarce water. So on that cheery note, Mr. Parkin, where do we go from here? I don't see any other hands up for questions this time. So we go to Mr. Hiddings.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, if there's no further questions, I'd like to turn this over to Bear Livestock Ranch Manager. I think that's his official title, Zach Hiddings, and he'll take us on from here.
All right. Thank you.
Mhm.
Thank you all for inviting us to update and present to the council tonight. And Stanley was unable to make it. We're not, either one of us, very good at all this Zoom stuff, so I'll do my best to work through it. And I hope if anyone has any questions, I can try and answer them as we go. And I'll try not to go too fast or too slow and put you to sleep. So this is just this first slide is just a picture of the headquarters of the Monolith Ranch. It's actually a picture Darren gave to us and that we hang in the office. And I think it's such a neat picture that I've used it before on presentations to the ranch committee, and I put it up here again because it's does a lot of justice to the beauty out there of the monolith. So some of you, I don't know if you've heard a lot of this information before. As we update the ranch committee each January, I don't know how much of it gets pushed up the pipeline, so I'm going to follow a similar format and kind of jump right into our annual operations. I guess pictures are worth 1,000 words, so I've included quite a few. Hopefully that's okay. We'll just go to the next slide, please. Our hay production figures is I think one of the most interesting things that we like to present on year to year. The alfalfa pivot's always a hot topic, and first cutting alfalfa this year was actually down a little bit. I'll get into some thoughts and notes a little later. Second cutting alfalfa was up significantly from last year, almost double. Grass hay production, dry grass hay, on the headquarters, 283 tons. Our grass hay moves up and down pretty drastically depending on how much grass haylage we produce. And for those that don't know, grass haylage is simply cutting the grass hay when it's wet, not drying it and storing it by means of piling, packing, and allowing it to ensile into silage. And it gives us a lot more flexibility in our feeding program. So our grass hay and our grass haylage kind of track opposite of one another. And this year we put up a lot of wet haylage, and along with that, our dry grass hay was down. I think it's important to note that we didn't harvest any hay whatsoever from the Goforth or the Hunsinger meadows this year, and that was just an operational decision to rest those meadows and hopefully bring them into next year in a little better shape. And so our total hay production on a dry basis, to achieve this number, we convert our grass haylage back to a dry basis, basically just by dividing those tons by 3, 2,500 tons this year. So not a record, but nothing to scoff at by any means either. This is a graph that I've put together over the years. The orange line, snow water equivalent. Darren and I guess, have gone back and forth on the numbers a little bit, and I tried to get our heads together this year and the timing to get this turned in, I don't think I quite got Darren's figures used. This is snow water availability based off the state engineer's office's website, showing about a 95% snowpack for the 2022 hay season, and then the tons of hay shown by the bar graphs. So back in 2019, setting a record. Other years back there a little farther, quite low. 2021 was kind of a tough year, just no rain really to go along with the irrigation water. And this year, 2022, sort of a happy medium, reasonable irrigation water and enough timely rain to hit those high spots on the hay meadows and grow the feed where the irrigation water can't get to. Couple just quick thoughts on the hay crop as a whole. Irrigation water was average or maybe a little better. First cutting alfalfa, we felt fell short because of a couple things. It's no secret that alfalfa stand is aging. It's I believe 7 years. It's been in production. It does have a lifespan. It's not going to last forever. It's soon to be refarmed and replanted. And at the end of its lifespan, you often see a decline. Also, likely this year we had a pivot breakdown that took a minute to fix. And so we harvested it slightly early on first cutting, which just doesn't give it as long of a growing period. Second cutting alfalfa, though, way more than last year, kind of a twofold. As far as I'm concerned, it was a second application of fertilizer, which is something that we've never done before, but decided to try just because of the scarcity of hay in our area and the amount of water that pivot has available. It was worth giving it a go. And we think the second application of fertilizer, along with the fact that the pivot ran essentially flawlessly and for a longer duration than normal, second cutting was quite good. The meadow hay production overall, so grass hay and grass haylage, much higher than last year. I guess thanks to good irrigation water, strong efforts by city staff to complete the irrigation, and just enough timely rain to get us by. Next slide. So kind of our summer grazing information for 2022. 233 steers graze the pastures that would be east of Highway 287, also including the narrow strip of land that runs between 287 and the railroad tracks. This is about 75% of what we consider normal because of the drought. And while we have had adequate snow in the mountains and plentiful irrigation water, we do feel that it was necessary for us to cut our stocking numbers and take care of the land because of just not a normal amount of rainfall from what we've seen over about a 20-year history on the monolith. Then if we look at kind of a next parcel of land being the pastures west of Sand Creek Road, if you will, but not counting the hay meadows, so all of the upland meadows or upland pastures really experienced some dry conditions in this area. We grazed 87 heifers and 4 bulls on these pastures, which roughly would be 33% of normal. Some of that area on the ranch, the farther west you go before you get to the irrigated meadows, received almost no rainfall. And it's always interesting to me, the farther east you go on the ranch, the more rain it gets. The portions in the middle can receive almost none. And this was one of those years. I think it's interesting to note the Goforth meadow and pastures would be between those previous two areas I described. So between 287 and Sand Creek Road, we grazed and fed quite early this year in April. We had about 500 steers down there and did quite a bit of feeding and grazing. before the growing season even started, and then left the go forth to rest the entire balance of 2022, hoping that it would rain and hoping that we'd bring it into 2023 in as good a shape as we can. Jumping right into some notes about our winter cattle feeding operations. This is just a picture from the big meadow. Looking out to the east, you can hardly see the Laramie Range mountains because it was such a cold, foggy day that day. Next slide, please. This is looking at 2021 and 2022 because this was intended to be a recap of last year, more than a discussion of this year. But our peak feeding time occurred in the month of April, at which point we were feeding a little over 3,000 steers on the Monolith Ranch. These are steer calves that come to us weighing 550 to 600 pounds, and we feed and grow them on the ranch until the 15th or 20th of April, and then start shipping them to other ranches where they are turned out on summer grass. Usually the last ones leave by the 1st of June. During the month of April, we were feeding a little over 2,100 steers on the meadows at the headquarters. We had 375 in the Pioneer pasture, and then those 500 steers out in the go forth. Daily, we feed, when we have these numbers on hand, we feed a little over 7,000 pounds of grass, 18,000 pounds of alfalfa, 9,000 pounds of corn, and 30,000 pounds of grass haylage. To do all this work, other than my daughter that's driving the tractor in the picture, we do employ four full-time employees. We use multiple part-timers, often college students, neighbors, spouses of our full-time people, and so on and so forth, and various other contractors.
Whatever you can.
Just a note on this year, just to give you an idea for comparison, our count on hand right now would be about 875 calves, and we have 150 bred heifers that we're working to sell. Next slide, please. We didn't quite have a real good idea what exactly we were to be presenting on when we got this invitation, and Stanley and I kicked some ideas back and forth and decided to, I guess, just touch on a couple of our projects that we felt were our favorites from the last couple years. Not to say that we haven't gotten anything improved or repaired or developed on the ranch this year. We've done a handful of projects again. Probably the most noteworthy one would be improving the driveway into the Hunsinger house and property so that it would be up out of a bottom and easier to maintain for snow removal. But what I really wanted to talk about was just from the last couple years, some noteworthy, the most productive projects, the most conservation type projects, and things that we feel kind of brought the most value to the ranch and would be of the most interesting to present on. So this is just a slide with a handful of pictures, but the next slide and the first project I wanted to quickly discuss was to rebuild the corrals on Spring Lakes Road, which would be the corrals that service the eastern third or so of the ranch. And for the entire time that I've been here, the before picture shows kind of what they looked like. They were really not serviceable in any way. And the after pictures that I show here show what we've gone in and completely rebuilt that facility to where it's a productive and a set of improvements that adds significant value to the property. Next slide, please. Just another before photo. And the next one is an after. And the next one. Just a note that The facility was designed with loading pickups and trailers, test weighing cattle, and loading semis using a portable loading chute, and that potentially a permanent one could be added down the road. Next slide, please. And then basically that the design is adequate for receiving cattle in the spring and shipping and marketing cattle in the fall. And just a note that all the materials were sourced locally. A lot of it was recycled, and even some of it was able to be reused from the old corral. Kind of wanted to jump into some water development and conservation type projects. This being the first one that we did in 2020 over on the Simpson Springs area, kind of on the far southeast corner of the ranch. Next slide, please. So the Simpson area is really neat. It's got a variety of spots kind of shown with the red arrows where springs actually flow water out of the ground down there in the bottom of the valley, basically. So water that's coming down in the rock formations and finds its way to the surface on the ranch by the Simpson house and in the Simpson Springs area. Those springs feed a reservoir, about a 2-acre reservoir, and then a pretty sizable wetlands to the north of that reservoir. And historically, this is what's been explained to me, some from Darren, some from neighbors, a lot of it long before any of our times. Those springs were used to water livestock. And eventually, as livestock competed for the limited water that was available and the cleanest water that was available, they stomped around and they damaged the springs to the point that they almost quit flowing. And at some point in time, I don't have a date, the city did intervene and revived those springs by excavating them and then built fence to protect that sensitive area. So the goals of this project were essentially the southeast pasture on the ranch in the city's efforts to protect the fragile wetlands and springs, actually cut off livestock water in what we call the Thompson pasture. It's about 280 acres that lies in the far southeast corner. And so the primary goal was to get stock water put back into that pasture. A secondary goal was to add an additional water source into the Simpson pasture. And then the last goal was to do it in a way that was multi-season and could provide water at any point during the year or the grazing season so that we could create rotational grazing based off of good pasture management and use of the land in a way that wasn't dependent on the availability of the water. And the water, as it was available to us in the past, was more summertime only, because it either had to be hauled or it had to be run through actually a garden hose almost 1,000 feet from the house to that Thompson pasture. So it was definitely nothing that could work in the early spring or late in the fall. It was only a summertime option. And so working closely with Darren, and I don't honestly know who. Darren does such a good job of working with us and probably doing all the legwork on these hard questions to get permission for this kind of stuff. But the city gave us permission to attach onto an existing artesian well that was dug for the purpose of, I guess, exploring some municipal water in that area, and then eventually wasn't used. So we hooked onto it and installed a couple 1,000 feet of underground pipeline, and then 2 tanks, just like you see in this picture, in the Thompson pasture, and 2 tanks in the Simpson pasture, so that there's plentiful and reliable stock water in each of those locations. And in this picture, you can see the reservoir and the tree grove around the house and the riparian area. And the fence line between the water tanks and the reservoir is that that separates the sensitive area from where the livestock are allowed to graze. We'll go to the next one. And this is just a picture from the Simpson pasture with the cattle watering there in the background. And again, you can see the tree grove. And I think the thing that's probably the neatest about this system is that it's worked year round as needed. It's artesian, so it requires no pumping, no electricity. It's just a natural water pressure that's created by that flowing well that pushes it to the tanks. And basically since 2020, I think if we go to the next slide, we've successfully kept all cattle out of that sensitive riparian areas and been able to manage those pastures much better. The next project I want to talk about just real quick is over in the Big Meadow, which would be farther west on the ranch, almost to the headquarters. And just a little background is that historically, in our experience, we've been able to produce significantly more hay on the monolith than we could support cattle to feed all of that hay because of our limited livestock water in the wintertime. And so in effort to combat that, we were using as many as 15 1,000 gallon water tanks above ground that would slowly fill up overnight to water enough cattle to use up that hay without having to truck it to a different operation or to sell it and to use the ranch to its highest potential. And that system worked great, and we did it for a couple years until it got to about 0. Into the teens, it was okay, but at 0 degrees, we were having as much as 10,000 gallons of water per night that would become frozen and unavailable to livestock. So we decided to take off into a new project. If we could go to the next slide, please, where we basically installed 2 6,000 gallon cisterns and a high flow pump that pushed water to stock tanks. And so these cisterns fill up slowly overnight, and a pump runs 80 gallons a minute. If we could go on to the next slide, I think. 80 gallons a minute to the stock tanks where the cattle actually drink. And so now we've created a situation where all of that storage is underground. It's below the frost line. It doesn't freeze. It's not wasted. And we can sufficiently water enough cattle to feed the hay that the ranch produces, even in the coldest temperatures. And so an unintended bonus, if you will, to this project is that this system has alleviated so much strain off of the main water system at the headquarters of the ranch that it's actually taken way less time and money and manpower to keep it running, and it's had way less issues because the stress on it's been reduced. So here's just a picture of one of the tanks that it feeds. That cistern pushes 40 to 50 gallons a minute, I suppose, to this tank and 30 to 40 to the other one. And we no longer are chopping ice and throwing it away. Go to the next one. So this project is kind of my favorite. I think it's one that's of quite a bit of importance to us conservationally, operationally, and something that I hope the city's happy about and proud that we can implement this on the city's ranch. If we could go to the next slide. So for as long as people have been raising cattle in the Laramie Valley, it's safe to assume that they were allowing cattle to drink freely from the Laramie River, and we were no different. because of the water system that we had in place, we were allowing cattle in certain areas to access the Laramie River and to drink directly from it. And certainly this has unintended consequences. I don't think any of us would dispute that cattle manure and related contaminants in and adjacent to the river is not ideal. The fencing that allows cattle to access the river is unsightly and gotten worse. And the use of machinery to remove ice, more likely than not, impacts the fish. And then we do get a certain amount of concerns and complaints from fishermen and other recreationists when the cattle are in and around the river. So if we go to the next one, we came up with a plan to dig a new well at the river's edge and utilize solar pumping to send about 30 gallons a minute of water from this new well to an off-river livestock water tank, and then maintain the existing fences to keep the cattle out of the river altogether. So here's the tank that well feeds, and if you can see there in the background, the river is where the trees are, and so this is off the river by about 1,000 feet, and we've completely been able to keep the cattle from watering out of the river, at least on this southeast side thus far. And this project, as well as the other three, it's noted there on the slides, all of these projects were done as a cooperation of Bear Livestock and City Laramie. City of Laramie employees, specifically Dave Strain, had a ton to do with helping us gather supplies, providing manpower and the machinery to trench in water lines. Bear Livestock's put a lot of effort into it all, and all three of these water projects have been done in cooperation with the Laramie Rivers Conservation District, who's cost shared quite a bit of money over the past 3 years to making this all happen. So I know we're not supposed to talk about new leases, and I don't have any intent of doing that, but I keep putting in a plug for kind of what we would like to do next. And we've proposed completing a similar project to this Road Meadow Solar in the Pioneer pasture and developing off-river stock watering in the Pioneer so that we can say that 100% of the ranch is watered without cattle directly drinking from the Laramie River. And I think we're probably getting closer to it. Darren and I talk about it from time to time. I know the city's asked that that we just hold our horses a minute because of a greater project happening with Ducks Unlimited in that area, or possibly happening. Maybe to not take on so much right at the end of a lease, and also to gain, just an understanding of what exact new methods we might have to use with the city's energy policies, and to kind of combine it all in a greater management plan for the Pioneer. It's something that we're still really interested in, really excited about, and would love to see happen. And we're ready to pick that ball back up whatever time it becomes appropriate. And so I don't have a lot else to talk about operationally. I wanted to make just one little comment about wildlife and hunting. Something that's been really interesting to me over the last 7 years that I've been here is that our white-tailed deer population has almost gone away. We used to have about 80 head of deer that almost resided at the headquarters. And I would say that day in and day out, we're down to about a dozen. Mule deer seem to be becoming more and more prevalent on the alfalfa pivot, almost to the extent that I would encourage that there's an opportunity to do something with Game and Fish to develop a hunting program for those mule deer. in a really limited way. I wouldn't want to see them chased off or wiped out, but possibly there's an opportunity. I think it's also interesting that moose frequented the ranch again this year. I wish I would have some pictures of them. And then we had a herd of 27 elk that we saw almost every day in late August and September, and even on into October. Primarily they were on the Bath Ranch, but we did see them coming farther and farther onto the monolith as the year went by. And we have lots of antelope pretty much everywhere you look. So with that said, I would entertain any questions. I also would want to offer that I absolutely love talking about all these projects and water developments and things like that, and would take anyone on a tour if they would be interested, and more than happy to do that anytime.
Thank you. Questions? Councilmember O'Doherty.
I have to know what the blue box is on, it's about page 10 of the slide presentation. There's a blue, it looks like a water tank, much smaller than the other ones.
I'm struggling to remember what my own picture is. But
Okay, so it says noteworthy ranch improvements and repairs.
Oh, okay. So that's a water tank that we installed. I'm with you now. We installed a new waterer in the corrals there at the headquarters. We've actually installed 5 total, but that's one that we completed a couple years ago. Basically to go in and replace the old rusted out. One of them had actually caught on fire. That needed updating, and so we installed a new water tank, and all the electrical was brought back up to code, new concrete foundation, and the whole works.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Other questions? Mr. Eddings, you said you weren't really sure what to put in the presentation. I think you did an excellent job. You also had some concerns expressed about the Zoom call. You did an excellent job. If we could, go back to slideshow one more time, please, City Clerk. And I think it's just one slide before the last slide that Councilmember O'Doherty wanted us to look at. Just want to have a peek at that again. Okay, well, no, I guess it's a couple more. I want to go back to that winter feeding picture. By the way, the photography, yeah, thanks. How did we get this picture?
So that picture looking east, and what you see there in right up close is the cistern that we installed in 2018.
Yeah.
And we actually had an incident where the cistern pumped itself empty, and it has electronics built into where it won't hurt the pump if it does that. But the cistern actually pumped dry, and this is a picture that I took standing on top of the water truck as we refilled it as quickly as we could so that the cattle would have water. And that was kind of one of those days where, if memory serves me, it was 25 or 30 below. You can see the frost on the grass and various plants there inside that fence. It was not a nice day, but all of our guys, all of everyone in this industry turned themselves inside out to keep those cattle watered and fed, and that's me standing on top of the water truck, and I thought it was too cool not to take a picture.
Yeah, it's a good picture. It's a good picture. And I'll just say again, it's a good presentation. I think it's a little bit of a new type of presentation for the council. I think we really appreciate it very, very much. Go ahead, Councilmember Gabriel.
Hey, thanks, Mayor. Zach, I just wanted to kind of echo what the mayor had said. A great presentation, and I learned a lot tonight. I was wondering about all the decisions that you talked about and the things that go on in the ranch. do you have a team that gets together to make all these different decisions, or how does that all come about? Seems like there's a big operation and a lot of things to talk about and decisions to be made. Just kind of wondering about your team.
So it's unfortunate that Stanley couldn't be here tonight because he's a much better speaker than I am, for one. But Stanley and I manage the Monolith Ranch as well as a variety of other properties in southeast Wyoming and northern Colorado. And we spend a good portion of many days discussing not only the Monolith Ranch, but all these other places. And then we do look to a number of people to give advice. Martin Curry at the Conservation District has been a huge help to me. Various people, Larry Munn, that's also on Conservation District Board, has helped with soil information. Other farmers and ranchers that are much bigger than us, provide lots of input and advice. Darren mentioned Helena Ag. That's who we use on the Monolith for our fertilizer recommendations. And it really takes a team barely covers it. It takes more than a team to keep the Monolith Ranch and our other operations on sound footing. And there's a lot of time that goes into it.
Great. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Other questions for Zach? Again, I think this has been a really good presentation, and your ability to present it has been just fine, Mr. Iddings. Again, with the humility on the presentation, it's been great. We really appreciate it. I think something we need to say at the conclusion of this, in addition to our thanks, piqued a lot of interest in some of your projects out there. A lot of creativity going on out there with some of the things that the management is coming up with. The ranch management team is coming up with. We appreciate that. We like to hear it. We like to see it. The other thing I think, this is more of a matter of just sort of a public record piece here, but we lease this for these operations because that is the way that the city of Laramie maintains our productive water right, a consumptive use water right out there. And until we are using that water for different purposes, the way that works in the state of Wyoming is to utilize that water for this type of agricultural activity. And there is no other way for the city of Laramie to maintain that. And I bring that up, and I say that in the hopes that there's a story on this or something of that nature later, folks from the newspaper, that's understood, because I think sometimes as a member of the city council, you can get questions like, well, why are we doing that? Why do we have a ranch out there? Why are we doing those things out there? Well, that is why. We're not just doing it because we want to or because it's Wyoming. Well, I guess in a way it is because it's Wyoming, and water rights in Wyoming are held and kept for beneficial consumptive use through agricultural activity, unless it's being used by people or industry or other industry. And right now that's not the case. And so for the city to be able to maintain these water rights for the future going forward, we partner with an agricultural business organization to do that. And that's why. And after seeing this presentation tonight and hearing a lot about it, I'm glad we do. It looks like it's being well run, and I really like seeing some of the projects and kind of innovative things you guys are doing out there. So we appreciate it very, very much.
Thank you for the opportunity to present, but also for the opportunity to lease a really neat piece of property and a real asset here in the valley.
Thank you very much. We have some, any other questions, Mr. Iddings? Okay, Councilmember Cumby, sorry if I missed you before.
Oh, no, I just raised my hand. And Mr. Iddings, I just want to say, I really appreciate both the innovation that you described to us, as well as your attention to conservation and to water protection. And I found it most informative, and it was an excellent presentation, and thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Absolutely. well worth our time, council, I would say. Very interesting. Okay, that's going to take us to the next portion of our work session here this evening, and I can't remember who's going to take us there, but maybe Mr. Parkin can help remind us.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, the next portion of the evening's agenda is going to be an operational overview of the activities that have taken place on the Bath property that was acquired this summer. The city entered into a short-term contract with the Mathises, the Kite Ranch and Wildtech to get us through this season. And I think JD will give a presentation here and provide that overview for everybody and see what we've done with that property over the last 6 months since we acquired ownership.
Thank you very much, Mr. Parkin. Mr. Mathis, that is your cue, I believe, sir. Mr. Mathis, we got to have you turn on your sound for us, and then we're ready to go. Thank you very much.
There we go. I think I've got the technical difficulties worked out now, hopefully. Can everyone hear me okay?
Absolutely. Great. Thank you for being here.
Good deal. Thanks for having me. So JD Mathis with Wyotech. I also am associated with the Kite Ranch LLC, and they are both owned by the same enterprise. So we partnered with, as Darren said, the city to do some work on the Bath Ranch this summer. So that's what we'll be discussing. Next slide, please. So thank you everyone for having me. I'm excited to be here, and I am the Offsite Training Programs Coordinator. I was brought on with Wyotech in the end of June, and they brought me on to start a ranching program and a heavy equipment operator program. So next slide, please. Our agenda, first talk about the welcome and then our purpose on what we're doing out there on the Bath Ranch. And then we'll discuss the Bath Ranch operational updates. And then from there, the Conservation Fund initiated projects. And those are projects that we partnered with the Conservation Fund on to do some work, but it's actually on the city's owned property. But the Conservation Fund had an interest in it because they will get the benefits of the water from those projects in the end state. So next slide, please. So this is just a neat picture. Same with Zach. I like a lot of pictures. So I thought this was kind of a cool one with the moon in the background and our truck when we were out doing some haying operations. So our purpose, Wyotech intends to start a ranch program and a heavy equipment operator program. And as such, we have interest in different ranching operations in the area. We also want to build upon Wyotech's working relationship with the city of Laramie and also develop a good working relationship with the Conservation Fund. So I think we've got a good foot in the door with that. We really appreciate the city of Laramie. They've done a lot for us over here at Wyotech with the 90,000 square foot addition that we just finished building for training. So it's been great working with the city in that aspect. And in order to build upon our relationship with the city of Laramie and the Conservation Fund, Wyotech, in conjunction with the Kite Ranch, partnered with these organizations to get some work done on the Bath Ranch. Next slide, please. Thank you. So this is our operational updates. Next slide. So these couple listed here are a little less of the exciting projects that we tackled. And I got better pictures on the coming slides, but starting in May of 2022, the former owners of the Bath Ranch still had their cows out running on the hay meadows. And so we wanted to just help get those off the hay meadows to help with that hay production, getting that hay ground, the grass growing and not getting eaten off by the cows. So the Kite Ranch purchased the cattle from the previous owners to get those removed off the meadows. In June, we got into a short-term agreement with the city, the Kite Ranch did, to drag the meadows, to help with the irrigating, and to conduct the haying operations for the summer. May and June, we worked on dragging the hay meadows and breaking up the cattle manure, so that just helps with natural fertilization out there. And then we also got the irrigation water going with the city. I guess the city more got the irrigation water going, but we helped kind of monitor that and adjusted the water as it was needed. In conjunction with the city, they did the majority of it. We had guys out there to help and monitor that. And then August through September, we did a lot of irrigation work. We did a little bit of work with a V-plow ditcher, and there's a lot more out there that needs done. As with a lot of ranch operations, they kind of fix what's a priority, and a lot of stuff falls to the wayside. So there's a lot of work that needs done out there on the Bath Ranch, and we've been happy to help get some of that done. So next slide, please. So this is one of our big projects that we did out there on the Bath Ranch. Wyotech supplied an equipment operator and covered the fuel expenses, and we cleaned one of the main irrigation ditches to the Bath Ranch. So go ahead, next slide, please. We started around the beginning of July, and we used a leased John Deere excavator. We cleaned a little over 2 miles of irrigation ditch. And there's a lot more that needs done. We kind of ran out of time to keep working on that project, but we got a good start going with it anyhow. Then we ended up kind of wrapping that work up middle of September. And next slide. So here is an aerial view of the hay ground, primarily on the Bath Ranch that the city purchased. And the blue lines are the ditch that we cleaned. So if you think of hair clog in your sink drain, these ditches had a lot of willows built up in them, and it just impedes water flow. And if you don't have, it just slows down the amount of water that you can use. So that was our purpose, was to go in and clean these ditches out and improve water flow, so there was more for productive hay ground. And so those blue lines are where we cleaned them. So here's just a couple pictures of that. The top left picture, you can see where we've been in there and clean, and we piled some of the dirt there along that ditch bank. And then in the foreground, you can see where all those willows still are that we hadn't got to yet. And then the picture there on the right, that's the ditch that we've got cleaned up, and the water's flowing better. And then that one in the middle, that's the ditch still full of willows, and that's just kind of impeding that water flow, and that's what we were fixing. Next slide. So our haying operations. Next, please. So the Kite Ranch entered into agreement with the city to put up the hay for 2022 on the Bath Ranch. We put in the bid for $96.25 a ton. Some folks think that was a little bit high, but most of the time, from our experience, we've done some custom haying, and you can sell your hay for about $200 a ton, your lower quality hay here currently. And if you're putting up custom hay and you're taking the hay crop, you'll get about 50% of it. That, and we knew the hay crop was not going to be that great and productive out there, so we had to accommodate for that, as well as increased fuel cost. So haying operations started the last week of July and continued through the beginning of September. We ended up putting up around 286 bales of hay. They weighed an average of 1,567 pounds each, and that equated out to about 224 tons of hay that we produced. We mowed approximately 385 acres, and we got that number. I kind of put a rough guesstimate together off a Google Earth image and guessing where I'd cut, but the city actually flew the drone over our meadows, which was it's just so cool, that technology. And they were able to, through the pictures of the drone, get an accurate count of the number of acres that we actually cut. So I was guessing we'd cut around 320 acres, and it turned out we cut about 385 acres, and that equated, compared to our tonnage, we only got 6 tons of hay produced per acre. So if you're getting, just for your knowledge, a decent hay crop, you should be getting 1.5 to 2 tons of hay per acre. So that compare that to 0.6 tons of hay produced, and that's really low yield rate. And then on really productive hay ground, you can get up to probably 4 or 5 tons per acre. So we invoiced the city for that hay for $21,560, and then we were short this year on hay at the Kite Ranch, so we ended up putting in a proposal to buy the hay for $200 a ton, and we got that bought from the city. So next slide, please. So here's some pictures of us out there at WyoTech with our mechanicking training background. We get good partnerships with C&B equipment, RDO equipment, John Deere. Those are both John Deere dealers. C&B is out of Sheridan, and they've got several dealerships around. RDO equipment, they leased us the excavator. And so we are using brand new top of the line tractors out there to put up the hay. So that's that tractor pulling the rake, the one in front on that lower picture. That's a pretty big tractor to be pulling a rake with. A lot of overkill, but it was sure nice to have those fancy machines out there. Next slide, please. So here's us hauling the hay off after the snow had started flying. So Darren touched on the conservation fund a little bit, and I learned a little more from him this evening with them buying and partnering with the city to buy the other part of the Bath Ranch. And they reached out to us, and we reached out to them. We partnered together to do some projects out there. And so Sand Creek feeds a reservoir. They dammed it up for irrigating purposes, and had some issues going on there, which was affecting the irrigation water and the standard creek flow that was going through there. So we went in and did some projects in there. Next slide, please. So this is an aerial view of the projects that we did. If you look at the number one there, Sand Creek Culvert Replacement, that circle around that's where we replaced a culvert. We removed one that was placed too high, and it was also replaced with a smaller culvert, and I'll get into those on the next slides. But so that was our first project. Then those red T's, so those are culverts with head gates attached to them, just for your knowledge. And then you see the road going across there by number one. That's where they dammed up Sand Creek. Number two on there, Sand Creek Reservoir Overflow. When they dammed up the Sand Creek for this irrigation, I would guess in the early 1900s, but I don't know. They'd also built in an overflow, so if you got a big flood event, that reservoir area would overflow. And it worked, but it washed the dirt out. So that number two, Sand Creek Overflow, that's where we had to go in and fix that project. That number three, irrigation flume replacement, we went in and a flume, it measures your water for irrigating purposes, and it had washed out. And so we went in and replaced that. And then there was a culvert erosion repair there on number four down that ditch. That's an irrigation ditch that arrow's pointing to. And you can see a road there in the lower right corner, and where those two meet is there was a culvert, and on the outlet side of that culvert, it had eroded something terrible. So we went in and fixed that. Next slide, please. So, as previously stated, at some point, a 48-inch culvert collapsed, and it was replaced with a 36-inch culvert. And it was also placed at a higher elevation. And with that, when that happened, it impeded the water flow down Sand Creek. So that was the main Sand Creek culvert, and that the one they replaced it with was set too high, and it was also too smaller than the, I can't say it was the original, but the 48-inch culvert that was pulled out of there. So we went in and removed the 36-inch culvert and installed a 48-inch culvert, and then we set it about 16 to 18 inches lower than what the culvert we removed was. With that, we placed erosion control fabric around the culvert inlets and outlets, and that just helps with preventing erosion. And then we put in a bunch of concrete riprap and then a concrete head wall as well. So also for erosion control. Next slide, please. So here, that top left picture, we had to dam off the water from getting to that head gate, just kind of below the arm of that excavator. And then the next slide, we're lifting out the head gate and then the culverts on that next slide. Then we went in, placed the new 48-inch culvert. You can see that brown fabric, that's erosion geotextile material that we placed in to help with erosion on both the inlet side and the outlet side of that culvert. And then where all the rock and its concrete block that was there, we pulled that out of that area and then replaced it and set it back in there. That's on the outlet side of that culvert, and that just helps with the erosion as that water comes out of the outlet side. This would be the inlet side of the culvert. We put in, it had a wood block wall that was somewhat effective, but a concrete wall just works so much better. So we went in and poured a concrete head wall on the inlet side of that culvert. And then there's just a couple more pictures. That picture there in the center's water flowing after everything was finished on the outlet side. So the next one we'll talk about is the overflow that washed out. And presumably during a flood event, the reservoir overflowed and washed out the dirt that was there, and it was a continually flowing water down an irrigation ditch instead of down the main creek. So they essentially lost control of the water. And then for repairs, we dug out the riprap and material that was there. We laid erosion fabric down and reinforced that back with riprap. So this top slide, or the top two on the left, you can see the reservoir and then the concrete blocks in there. But if you look to the left on that top slide, or even in the next one, you can see water's flowing through there. So that's an overflow that was made to, if a flood event came in, overflow that reservoir. And it did its job at one time, but it also washed that material out of there, the dirt material. So we went in there, we laid that fabric down in that top right picture. Then we placed a bunch of dirt material on it, that bottom left picture. Then we folded that erosion fabric back over that pile of dirt and made a burrito type erosion wall in there that's won't wash out in the next flood event, or very minimal will wash out. Only that little bit of dirt that there's being placed on top of that erosion fabric has the possibility of washing out, but that's really reinforced now. So next slide, please. Excuse me. So here's the finished product. When we got completed in there, we finished putting the dirt back in over that erosion fabric and rebuilt that wall along the reservoir. Our northern irrigation ditch, irrigation flume replacement is next. So the flume had washed out, as I'd previously said. We dug the flume out of the ditch and found that it was not reusable. So we had to get a new one ordered, and we actually concreted the new one in place. So we won't have that washout problem again, hopefully. So that top left picture, that flume is in the irrigation ditch. You can see the water's just flowing around it, and it's been there a while with all the grass and stuff built up in it. So we had to get in there with by hand and shovels and dig the dirt out of there to try and make sure we didn't damage it if it was reusable. It turned out it wasn't. It's kind of hard to see in that top right picture, but that bottom is falling off of there, and you can see it a little bit in that bottom left picture with the excavator as well. That bottom's just fallen off it, completely rusted out. So then that bottom right picture is the new flume we got in. That flume is actually upside down right there. That's how they transported it, because the top was more flat than the bottom. So that's how it came off the trailer. Next slide, please. So here we went in and cleaned up the irrigation ditch, and we also straightened it out some because those flumes, for them to measure properly, the ditch is supposed to be fairly straight where the water enters. We poured a pad to set that flume on, and then we formed it up and then poured concrete around it. And then you can see there that bottom right picture is kind of the finished dirt work around there. So if you notice the water in that ditch, the groundwater is very high in this area, which caused a lot of extra work. We had to go out there morning and evening and use that excavator bucket to bail the water out of that ditch, so it wasn't getting to our work area. So then our last project we'll talk about, the culvert erosion repair. And this is one that the conservation fund, they only had so much money available, so Wyotech just we had our equipment out there. We had a guy that we'd offered him a quote, and they just didn't have the money to do it. So we had a guy had a bunch of riprap material that he wasn't going to charge us for, so we were able to haul that off his property and help him out, and help the conservation fund out as well. So we just did this project on Wyotech because we had everything out there, and we're working as it was. So the outlet side of a culvert developed approximately an 8-foot deep, 25-foot wide and 50-foot long washout beside the road crossing. So if you drove across the culvert, if you hugged the side of the washout too much, you could easily fall down this 8-foot hole with your vehicle. Fill dirt was gathered from an old dirt berm in the area and used to fill in the hole. Geotextile erosion fabric was also placed for erosion control, and then a bunch of riprap was hauled in and placed to prevent future erosion issues. Next slide, please. So this is a before picture where that pickup is. That you could easily fit 2 of those pickups in that hole. If you just look at the height of a pickup and think how tall they are, and then look at the sidewalls, it doesn't look like it's actually that deep, but if you kind of compare that pickup height, they would actually fit down there in that bottom. I think that dump truck would have fit in there, and you could barely have seen it. So now the bottom middle picture is where we'd started. I think that was about 12 dump truck loads full of material. So just for an idea on how big that hole was, and it's only partially filled. Next slide. So there's top left, we had filled the bottom in with dirt. We went in and laid erosion fabric down. And then just moving along the top, we placed a bunch of riprap in there on top of that fabric, and then some dirt back on top of it. And then those bottom 2 photos, those are the finished product when we left. So that was the completion of those. So it helped out tremendously. So, next slide, please. A little bit of additional work that we did out there. I was able to, that concrete pad for the flume. Next slide, please. I was able to contact the concrete company, and they had a truck coming back from a project with some leftover concrete in it. So we got the concrete for free on that. And so we were able to pour that pad that you saw at the flume earlier. And then along with that, this is the outlet side of a culvert that feeds that ditch where that flume was placed. And there's that concrete pad underneath there. So with the extra concrete, we formed that up. That was a big erosion hole, and it still is, but that'll help. That's the start to fixing the problem. So we poured that pad there. And then another, we were talking with Josh from the state engineer's office, and he goes out and checks the water on these when the irrigation water is running, and making sure that they're running the proper amounts and makes adjustments. And so that first picture, there's it's kind of hard to see, but we cleaned up, there's a flume there. And so we cleaned up all the willows out of there so Josh could get in there and read it. That was so full of willows you couldn't even see the flume unless you were right on top of it. So we cleaned that part of the ditch up and got those willows out of there so he can do his job better. A little bit on the financial side of things, what we did out there. Kite Ranch invoiced the city for close to $4,000 for our work dragging the fields and the irrigating operations. The hay production invoiced the city for $21,560. Wyotech covered the expenses of the irrigation ditch cleaning to include the project manager out there, the main equipment operator, and equipment costs and fuels, and that was probably approximately a $25,000 value. If you were to look at these are the equipment lease or what it costs to hire the operators and the length of time that we were out there. Projects initiated by the Conservation Fund. We had an agreement with them for some of the projects, and they primarily covered the cost of the materials, some of the labor that we hired, and the fuel. And then Wyotech covered the expenses for the project manager and the main equipment operator, as well as the equipment cost, and that was probably a $16,000 value in the end of that. And that was estimated quite a bit lower when we told them we were doing would do some in-kind work, and that was allowed them to get some alternate funding. But those dollars really went up with like groundwater, where we had to keep constant watch to keep the water out of our projects, and then doing that additional project out there. So, and that wraps up my presentation. Do I have any questions?
Let's see, do we have any questions for Mr. Mathis? Thank you for that presentation, very interesting.
Welcome, sir.
Bringing us up to date on some of the activities out there. I've got a question from Councilmember O'Doherty.
It's more of a comment. I
Oh.
really appreciate your resourcefulness and the cooperation of the different organizations. This is really, it's a win-win-win, I think. So thank you.
You're welcome. Yes, I completely agree with you. It's been great working with the city and the Conservation Fund. So good projects.
Good. Got a question or comment from Councilmember Cumby.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mathis, that was really a very informative presentation. I enjoyed it. I learned a lot from it. And I'm curious if you could describe just a little bit the new program at Wyotech and how that will be connecting with this. And I'm a former nursing professor, and so we were always looking for on-site clinical type experiences, and I'm perceiving this as being a place where students learn and then they come and practice. Could you describe the programs just a little bit, what that is?
Yes, absolutely. Excuse me, just saying I'm fighting a cold here. So, yeah, so I have the equipment operator program. We want to get them, bring students in to teach them all the aspects of running some heavy equipment. So we're looking at possibly a 6 to 9 month program that would kind of fall in line with the other things that we teach currently on the technician side, and get them out and actually working on real life projects. I was with the DOT prior to coming to Wyotech, and I went to some equipment operator training, and they'd stick you out in a sandbox in a dirt hole, and you just operate equipment a little bit, and they'd sign you off saying, yeah, you've done some of the minor stuff. And we want to really get them in and have them work on real life projects that are useful. Hopefully we can partner with the community if there's some needs out there that someone needs a leach field put in or irrigation ditches cleaned or anything like that. And we can help them out, and we can get students trained and just partner with those type of situations. I think that'd be fantastic. And then with the ranch program, our goal is to do a 12-month program and cover all the practical sides of ranching. So we want to talk about calving and haying, fencing, different fence designs like Zach had mentioned with where they rebuilt those corrals, and it made it a lot more functional and useful. Those are things that we want to teach the students, not only how to build those corrals, but thinking of the layout and design and what's going to be the most useful for those situations. So that was a really cool project. Water projects. Zach had a lot of cool water projects out there on the Monolith Ranch, and those are things that you need to know on a ranch. Where's it going to be the most useful prioritize projects and where can we do that. So that even the ranch program and the heavy equipment operator program can fall hand in hand with each other. Then we also have got some employers that, say John Deere, like I'd mentioned, the guys come in here and they learn how to mechanic, but they might not know how to hook up the baler to the tractor or even operate the tractor. So with these ranch programs, we can get them out there and say, hey, anyone that's interested in going to work in the ag industry, let's get you out and run a tractor for a day or a couple days and show you how to hook up this equipment and how the tractor functions and stuff. So those are, some, as you had mentioned, some real practical hands-on applications, and that's our goal.
Well, I just want to say I really appreciate the amount of collaboration that you've been able to facilitate and that you're teaching current, contemporary, innovative land conservation approaches to ranching. And I'm just very impressed with that. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
All right. Any other questions or comments for Mr. Mathis or the information that he shared with us?
Absolutely, Mr. Mayor.
Let's see if we have any more questions. Sorry. I don't know if my microphone was working there.
Last thing, just some tidy stuff.
All right. Well, it looks like we're at a loss for words. We're dumbfounded by the incredible work that's going on out there.
That's probably the main one coming up here.
Yet a little bit, but honestly, this has been yet another really informative and interesting presentation about the activities out there. Impressed with the innovation and creativity for utilizing that property. Want to see it continue, and I think we will. I think we're in good hands, and we appreciate the partnership so far.
Yes, thank you. It's been great.
Thank you, and thank you for taking time to be here and putting up with the Zoom call and everything. And we just really appreciate it.
I appreciate you having me. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Next, for tonight, we're going to do a little bit of an update about the Dallin Ditch rehabilitation project, and see we've got all hands on deck, but I don't know if we want to check with Mr. Parkin just one more time to give us the quick little intro, or let's do that. Welcome back.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I can just really quickly introduce Justin and Jackie. They're engineers with WWC here in town. This diversion dam project has came before you previously. You authorized the submittal of an application to the Wyoming Water Development Commission to enter into a level 2 study to design a new irrigation diversion structure that would be more functional, safer, and also provide a fish bypass. As a refresher, and maybe they'll go over this a little bit in their presentation. Our diversion dam was identified in, I think it was a 2016 Upper Laramie River watershed study, which was the level 1 look by the state at the Laramie River as the #1 fish block on the river system. And I believe that it's our current diversion structure is blocking 27 river miles of fish migrating up and down the Laramie River. So that was kind of the impetus to start this, along with operationally, our current structure is old and it's unsafe for our staff. And so we've moved past that. And so Justin and Jackie now have the conceptual designs that have been ranked. And I think they're going to go over how that project has progressed and what we're actually looking to present onto the state and hopefully bring on to a level 3 construction project. So with that, I'll turn it over to Jackie Carswell and Justin Terfair, and we'll go from there.
Perfect. Thank you, Darren. So as Darren said, my name's Jackie. I'm going to start off our presentation, and then I'll pass it off to Justin here in a little bit. So as Darren kind of mentioned, we're working on the Dallin Ditch Diversion Rehabilitation, which is a water development sponsored project. So next slide, please. Okay, so this is kind of highlighting exactly what Darren had just kind of went over. Water Development is funding this study. We kicked off the project in May of this year. We had our first public meeting end of May, early June. We did surveys, both topographic and geomorphic. We also did a LiDAR drone survey this summer at the ranch. And then this fall, we have been doing our kind of preliminary designs, conceptual designs, as well as having meetings with stakeholders, and that I'll kind of describe in more detail later on. That's what's been kind of ongoing up until today. We plan to kind of wrap up this project in April of 2023, so we're well underway. And the end result of this project, because it is a level 2 study, is to provide rehabilitation recommendations, conceptual level designs, as well as cost estimates to go along with those. So next slide, please. So as we've heard a lot of tonight, kind of where the downwind diversion is in relationship to town, it is on the Bath property, kind of on the far western side of that property. Next slide, please. So this is a zoom in kind of aerial image of the diversion itself. You can see kind of the white riffles, that is the diversion dam itself. And then to kind of the right or the east part of that, that is the diversion structure. As Darren kind of mentioned, this is a fish barrier, and it was identified by Anderson Consulting in the 2016 watershed study as being one of the major fish barriers on the Laramie River, which is what kind of kicked off this project. Yeah, so this is a photo of the diversion itself. It does show that you can see kind of the rock at the kind of bottom. It's kind of a older structure. I don't recall the exact dates of it, but it is old. Currently how it operates is that it's a series of slide gates that city staff has to walk across and manually turn in order to open and close the gates to raise or lower the water surface elevation upstream. It's old, it's in kind of rough repair. If you go to the next slide, please. As Darren kind of mentioned, there's a lot of maintenance concerns that go along with this. These photos were taken in high flow, and you can see in this kind of scenario here, the water in the river is almost overtopping that kind of walkway. They get debris that gets hung up on the structure as well, which makes it difficult to operate. And so in general, the other piece of this is that in high flows, we do see that the river will kind of route around the diversion, which is not ideal, as we've kind of talked a lot today in this work session, that it's really imperative that the city has this in working condition. You can see kind of in the photo on the left of the screen, you can see some of that debris that's hung up. Next slide, please. So this is kind of going back to the maintenance piece, looking specifically at the diversion structure itself. Because it's kind of set back from the diversion, it creates a kind of perfect location where debris and sediment kind of congregates right at the diversion structure itself. You can see in the photo the kind of woody debris that gets constantly clogged in there that has to be pulled out. Next slide, please. So that's the kind of background on it. And so now to kind of bring us up to where we are right now, as I kind of alluded to earlier, we've been having stakeholder meetings all fall. And these are the stakeholders that we've had involved: Wyoming Game and Fish, U.S. Fish and Wildlife, Laramie Rivers Conservation District, the NRCS, Ducks Unlimited, Trout Unlimited, Wyoming Wildlife, Natural Resource Trust. We've been meeting with these folks to kind of hear their concerns about the project and try to get their kind of engagement on it as well. The whole reason we're doing that is because the whole goal of this is to rehabilitate this diversion structure and additionally include fish passage. That's why Game and Fish and U.S. Fish and Wildlife, as well as the Wyoming Wildlife Natural Trust, and a few of the other partners are really engaged, is because they want to see fish passage at this diversion. And by having them engaged, they're willing to contribute funding. And so kind of the takeaway from this graph down here is really that the goal will be to get to the total project cost, the city's contribution to it at about 10% of project cost. And we had a meeting just this week with Water Development, and they made a mention too that funds are tight in Cheyenne. So the more project partners we can get involved and kind of get engaged, the better. It just makes it so that way it can be funded more completely. So next slide, please. So as I was kind of mentioning with these project partners that we've been working with, we came up with kind of project goals and objectives. And I really want to point out here that our primary goal in the first and the most important part of this is irrigation. And is the primary focus and the primary focus of all the designs is to make sure that irrigation is top priority. Our secondary priorities is fish passage, public gas access, and wetland preservation. But those do come second to irrigation because this is the city's investment in our kind of long-term water supply. So it is the focus. Some of our other priorities that kind of have come out of the stakeholder meetings is floater passage, with the idea of the Laramie River potentially someday becoming a more floater-friendly river. There are some folks who use it now, but hoping for that to increase in the future, as well as other goals are trying to mitigate any impacts to adjacent properties, as well as wetland preservations. Next slide, please. So these are the really detailed objectives that we came up with as our kind of working group. I won't go through all of them, but just to highlight a few of them, is as I kind of, and you can kind of see on this graph, the irrigation being the kind of the biggest priority because it does have the most objectives that we want to meet. But kind of the highlights of them is we want to make sure that the structure is safe and can be operated and maintained easily by city staff. We want to be able to provide flows at all water rights. As Darren kind of alluded to earlier, the city can pull the full Laramie River because we are the #1 water right. And so we want to be able to divert even when the river is low. We want to make sure that there can be winter operations. And then we move into some of the other pieces of fish passage and wanting to be able to move as many native species as we can, as well as provide as a natural looking design. Next slide, please. So with that, I'm going to pass it off to Justin, and he's going to describe the diversion alternatives that we've come up with to date.
Yeah, thanks, Jackie. Thanks, mayors, council members. So we're looking at a total of 3 diversion alternatives, weighing pros and cons of each option. And we're currently through that process right now, identifying what goals and objectives are being met and which are maybe not being met by these different alternatives. And I'll point out that all of these alternatives include a rock ramp. So the picture shown on the screen is of a rock ramp on Big Creek over south of Encampment, Wyoming. And the reason we want to include that rock ramp is it provides that natural looking aesthetic. It allows for floater passage during high flows, which is a 3rd priority goal for the project, but also allows for fish passage. So let's go to the next slide, please. So this photo here has a lot going on, but just generally speaking, this is our first alternative and likely our preferred alternative, but we're not quite there yet. The dam is the blue line kind of running up and down the figure. The yellow lines heading off to the right would be a rock ramp that would allow for floater passage right down the middle, fish passage, and then also there's a fish ladder on the north side, or a fish ladder on the top of the picture that would allow for passage during the irrigation season. And so this configuration right here meets all of the goals and objectives of the project. And right now is looking to be one of the preferred options. Let's go to the next slide, please. This second option is similar to the first in that it's a big rock ramp in the river. However, the footprint of the project becomes quite large. Floater passage and fish passage are both accommodated. Irrigation is easily accommodated. But one thing I want to point out is one of the challenges we're facing on this site is kind of the high river level that the dam creates. It's about 6.5 feet tall. And so currently the slide gates on the dam can be opened and the river pool can be dropped during the winter, which helps with icing issues, bank erosion, concerns from potentially neighbors. And so by going to a dam like this, we wouldn't allow for that winter operation to be dropped. And so that's one of the considerations we're looking at on this figure. Next slide, please. And now the third and final option we're looking at is actually moving the point of diversion upstream about just over a mile. So at the very top of the picture in the red circle is the existing point of diversion or the existing dam. And then in the bottom left is the moving that point of diversion upstream. We're weighing this option. Let's go to the next slide, please. Moving the point of diversion upstream, we get a much smaller footprint, maybe a smaller dam that long-term has easier maintenance for the city to take care of. And this option has some interesting issues related to easements and land access, ownership, and those are all topics we're considering right now with the stakeholder group. Let's go to the next slide, please. One thing I want to point out, even though moving that point of diversion upstream is nice, we get a smaller dam, that existing dam will likely need to be left in place to some degree. That dam supports a huge wetland complex upstream. There's a ton of silt in the river that's accumulated over the years. And so I guess my point is with all of these options, we have a lot of considerations to make. And luckily we have a nice robust stakeholder team with the Game and Fish, obviously the city, Fish and Wildlife Service, Conservation District, all of these stakeholders that'll help guide us to an appropriate answer. Next slide, please. Implementation schedule, just as we continue to take this project design and cost estimate forward, our next step is to really nail down which alternative we will develop conceptual designs for and include that pricing. All of our work needs to be done by May of 2023. And so we will have our final recommendations and draft report at that time. In the meantime, we do have one more public meeting as well as routine stakeholder meetings to help nail in our final approach here. The next step for the city, if they wish to move forward, if the city wishes to move forward with the project, would be to apply for a level 3 application. Those would be due next September. Level 3 is final design and construction, permitting. And so that would allow the project to take the next step towards final implementation. And through the whole process, in a perfect world, we'll be in construction in 2025. Next slide, please. So with that, I'll open it up for questions. Darren, myself, or Jackie should be able to answer them. So thank you.
Okay. Appreciate that overview, both of you. Pretty thorough. Work to be done still, some decisions to be made going into the next phases. Any questions from the council or comments? We just anticipate hearing more about this as the process moves forward. I think you'll have other interested supporters potentially come on board as it continues to move forward. Got a question from council membership or a comment, either.
It's a question. Been here a long time. Know several of those ranchers out there in the area. have they all been contacted? Have they attended any of these meetings? Because right there by the diversion is one of them that has a hay meadow that's flooded out half the time during the year, especially high water at all. It floods out his hay meadow, and so I'm just wondering, are you talking to those people too?
Yeah, thank you for the question, Councilmember. I'll address it. We have reached out to a few of the surrounding landowners. We got access on their properties to actually complete surveying and some of our field work, and so they are cooperating with the project. As we move forward, we'll continue to engage those landowners and hear their concerns, and hopefully be able to address some of them with the project. Darren, do you have any follow-up?
I realize that we're one of the biggest property owners out there now, but yeah.
Yeah, Councilor Schuster, the landowner directly upstream from us that you're referencing, that was really the impetus of moving the diversion dam upstream. I mean, there was other potential benefits, but we spent quite a bit of time, WWC has, looking at potential ways to minimize his impacts. Pretty extensive surveying, trying to see if we can lower the height of our dam, and, you know, try to do things to make his situation a little better. I think with the preferred option number one, preferred option number two, the permanent rock dam, that was one of the things that kind of took that off the list for us. Was, as Justin mentioned, it would hold the pool 12 months out of the year at the full level, which would not help us with neighbor relations. So, you know, at option number one, and I think Justin could speak to this, I think that he has got approval from Water Development to perhaps go in and study. There's an old oxbow type channel on the neighbor's property. If there's a way to potentially come in and improve that, or put a structure on his property to kind of drain that off, and maybe kind of drain some of the pool that we build up on our structure off of his property. So I'm not sure. We're not making any guarantees or promises at the end of the day that the situation will be any better. We can guarantee it won't be any worse. And I can say that we're spending an awful lot of time looking at options and trying to mitigate that situation as best we can.
I wish we could raise his property. I wish we could take some of our compost out there. That would be great fertilizer / raise his property up just a little bit and prevent some of that. But I know that a lot of this is just so unfortunate, but we have to use our water rights. Number one statement, we have to use our water rights. I'm sorry it affects him. We are still friends, although I get to listen about the city a lot. So you know how that goes, where you have friends on both sides and you try to stay in the middle. So yeah, thank you very much.
Okay. Other comments or questions, Councilmember O'Doherty?
So if the diversion structure were moved a mile upstream, then that seems like a lot more irrigation ditches to maintain, like we were just hearing about in the last. So that seems like the downside of that. Am I correct in that assumption?
Yeah, that option would include approximately a mile of new pipeline and ditch that would need to be maintained. Maintenance at the dam might decrease, but again, you take on more ditch maintenance, so it's kind of a trade-off there, and that's one of the considerations for sure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else? Vice Mayor Pierce?
Yeah, thank you. I just want to mention, and I don't know if you noticed, Mayor, that we've got members of the Monolith Ranch Committee, or the Ranch Committee tuned in our attendees, and thought maybe there might be a time to see if they had any questions or comments.
On the agenda, would be going to the public comment on the work session topic next. So absolutely, Vice Mayor. Any other questions from council or comments? It's really interesting and appreciate the update on the project. And as the Vice Mayor suggested, we'll go ahead and open it up for public comment and encourage those committee members to join us and speak. And I see we got Mr. Perot here, who's been serving on our ranch committee for some time, and we'd like to recognize him and allow him the floor. Go ahead. Welcome.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor and City Councilors. This is Marius. My wife is not here. I wanted to start my comments firstly to make it clear that I'm speaking on a personal basis, and a lot of the presentation has not been seen by the Advisory Council Committee, of which I am a member, but I don't want to infer any position and thoughts about the Advisory Committee. So these are personal comments. First, and I have several points I want to touch on. One is concerning Bear Livestock and Zach Eddings. My impression has been very positive about their work. They're very cooperative. They're good team members. And they have done a lot in terms of improvement of the infrastructure on the ranch. And I think the examples that Zach has given really are testament to that. And that they are very conservation minded and really doing a good approach to that. I did want to congratulate Zach on his election on the board of the Laramie River Conservation District. So that again shows really his commitment to the area and to conservation. Secondly, I wanted to talk about the Bath Ranch acquisition, but the presentation tonight, I really wanted to focus in on Wyotech and their participation in the work with Kite Ranch on the Bath property. Before I retired, I was a board member of our Industry Association Foundation, and this is construction mining equipment. We worked, and our direction was to work with tech colleges throughout the U.S. For the development of curriculum and their accreditation for construction mining equipment. I think that technical colleges are a tremendous asset here, and particularly Wyotech for both the city and the state, and even outside the state, is a great example of what an initiative can do and provide career opportunities and work opportunities for a lot of young people. I was very interested in the comments that they made, and particularly the expansion of their curriculum to include operators for heavy construction and agricultural equipment. I think that's a great direction, and again, based on my background, I would like to encourage them to look also beyond that in terms of heavy equipment and hydraulics. And I would hope that through the city, there would be a real focus in terms of supporting Wyotech and their efforts in the area. The third point I wanted to mention was on the Dowland Ditch. I don't have the technical expertise to really comment on it, but if you see the condition of the diversion dam and everything else on it, all I can say is I think that this project is overdue, and the sooner we get it done, the better. The last, which was not directly in the presentation, but there was mention of it, and I think that the opportunity for the advisory committee and myself, and I think this is a really interesting area, is the expansion into a ranch committee or board, and I think that will enable us to become more involved than even we are now. So with that, I want to thank you for the time that you've given me to express my views, and thank you very much.
Thank you, and appreciate your service on that committee for some time now, Marius. We appreciate it. All right. Any other comment? Members of the public, members of our advisory board. All right, seeing none. Go back to the council. Closing thoughts, council, on this? Of course, we'd just like to say thank you to everybody that took some time out of their evening to provide us with the really excellent presentations, all of them, and updates. And this information just kind of helps us refresh some things that we knew about already, and also learn some new things and learn about the stages of some of these newer projects and just ongoing and frankly really cool things that are happening out on these properties. Appreciate Marius's comments about partnerships and opportunities for further partnerships and strengthening community partnerships with agencies like WildTech. Expanding on those, and appreciate the comments and the thought towards public access and public enjoyment of some of these resources, while we also develop and protect water resources for the community going forward. Those things are not mutually exclusive, and they can be well integrated. And the last presentation touched on some of that a little bit for us as well. And we're just looking forward to future developments on all of these things surrounding these ranch properties. Thank you very much. Council, yes, yeah, hand for all of our presenters. We always like to do that. Council, I have just a comment about food for thought. We now kind of have a contiguous property out there, and it seems a little unwieldy to talk about the ranch properties or the Monolith and Bath ranches. I don't know. Might be from a communication and understanding standpoint, do with a little time to work with our city staff on exactly what we want that to be. One of those suggestions that you see in your materials is of course the renaming and restructuring, and Mr. Favre touched on this as well, of the advisory committee. It'll be some interesting work. City Manager, I see you joined us. Did you have some input for us or some closing comments on this topic that you wanted to share with the council?
Sure, Mayor. On the topic you just mentioned, as we've researched the Monolith Ranch Advisory Committee, I know Darren mentioned that we plan to bring forward an ordinance in order to make that body permanent. They have been ad hoc for 10 years. I think we should recognize they're official and they're staying. But as we've researched that, we also realized that we did originally write their ad hoc forming resolution in a vague enough way. It wasn't specific to the Monolith Ranch Committee. It was in fact written broadly to ranch property, probably because we only had one at the time. But it does appear that their purview is already inclusive enough to look at both of our properties and advise on those. And that'll ultimately be what staff are recommending to you, is that we make them a permanent body by ordinance with purview to advise us on all of our agricultural properties or ranches.
Yeah, I appreciate that, City Manager, and I wonder, City Manager and council members, if you agree with me that too, moving forward, probably stepping up some public engagement to get the general a better picture of the Laramie residents in general about the future direction of some of these things. Keeping in mind, as Councilor Schuster mentioned, our number one priority on all of these out there is to, of course, maintain the water right within the boundaries of the law. But expanding from that, doing some of the work to reach out to the Laramie residents and citizens to see what their thoughts are about moving forward in the future with the management of these properties and what the committee works to do, and then from the advisory committee what they what the council works to do. I see some opportunity for some cross committee work with the ranch. See heads nodding. A few committees pop up to the surface. To just in general, environmental advisory and a few others, where there might be some good use of time with some cross committee work. But those are just a couple of thoughts from me. And I think there's a lot of really good things to come out of the future of these ranch properties out there. And I believe that we all feel like those have been worthwhile investments and will continue to be. I know that we've talked about on this council the idea about maybe doing some climate resiliency studies. And as we touched on at the very beginning of this meeting tonight, and some questions that Darren answered for us, maybe trying to look a little bit into the future, given uncertainties around drought, precipitation, and what impacts that might have. That might be an order of business for these committees to take a look at and come up with some thoughts for the council, or work with the council to come up with a direction we might want to pursue. I won't say any more. I think there's been a lot of good information, and those were great presentations. They're all available on the agenda website. The links to the presentations are there. If you want to go back and look at them again, if members of the public want to go and look at the information provided, the city clerk's got all that compiled and easily available through the agenda center. But let's see if there's any public comment on anything that wasn't a work session topic. Okay, seeing no requests for any comments on that, we'll close public comment. And council, I just ask you to help work through the rest of our agenda, which is not lengthy. Can you take a look at your agenda for review and let us know if you have any questions about the consent or regular agenda for the meeting of the 20th, which so far appears to be the last meeting of our council, barring anything that comes up. We have a reserved date of the 27th for anything that we need to take care of. Councilmember Adore. Sorry, I don't know if you heard me. Councilmember Adore, go ahead.
Yeah, your voice is kind of drifting off.
It's my microphone swinging
yeah,
around. Is probably.
And I may have the same issue because I took my headphones off. I just wanted to point out that I'm bringing up the resolution to allow the hybrid meetings like Councilor Schuster asked for a while ago. And I'm bringing it up because we have the new ventilation system, and the staff that I talked to feels like they can handle the hybrid meeting, and our new counselors were all in favor from our orientation meeting. So that's why I'm doing that. Thanks.
All right. And you'll just bring that as an item for the council to discuss and vote on at the meeting on the 20th. Any other inquiries, questions about the agenda? City Clerk.
Mayor, two things. We didn't do city council updates and comments, but since we're on agenda
we
review.
Need to do that. Yeah, sorry, we'll do that, but we'll do it after the agenda review. Go ahead.
Sure. And so after our agenda review, the city manager did set some times for the council retreat, and that is on your scheduled meetings. So I just wanted to point that out for everyone, that those are the proposed times for the council retreat. We found out that WAM is not ending the agenda until 2 o'clock, and that's why there's the 4 o'clock start time.
Thank you. Anything else on the agenda before I go to you, back to you folks for your comments and updates? Tried to edit that out of the meeting, but the city clerk caught me. All right. Do we have any updates or comments? Yes, Councilmember Gumby. And then I'll go to you, Councilmember Gabriel.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to provide an update on the Albany County Mental Health Board. And we met Monday, and it was a rather robust and well-attended meeting. The county attorney, all of law enforcement, legal, clinical, city, county, were all present, and I felt like it was a very productive meeting. I started the meeting by posing the question to the committee relating to input that I've received from council members and also members of the community about what are we doing to operationalize the development of a crisis response team, and made note that Cheyenne is about to implement their program, and I did receive questions from people, why aren't we moving forward with this? And the bottom line is money, funding. Cheyenne received a grant that is going to support their pilot of this program, and VOA in Laramie applied for a grant, but it was not funded, and there are other grants in the works, but funding is an issue with it moving forward. But one of the things that the committee has done is to break the subcommittee into data and evaluation, and a second subcommittee on development and CIT committee. And on that committee will be Dr. Covello, who's head of VOA for now, both Albany County and Laramie County, the hospital, the city, the county, LPD, and the sheriff's office will all be on that committee to start to bring forward how we can best operationalize the development of a critical response team. In helping things move forward, I also asked the committee, what is it that the city can do to help facilitate and to help this continue moving forward? And one of the things we discussed is for us to begin to our work in the establishment of the Police Community Relations Board that we voted on creating. And we have delayed working on that because we were searching for a new chief, and we wanted to wait until we had that in place. And now that we have Chief Brown on board, Councilor Somerville and I, as former members of the Police Community Ad Hoc Committee, will be meeting with him to explore different models that he might have experience with, and to begin that conversation with Chief Brown about that board, how he would see that board. Secondly, I met with Christian Cavello, the director of VOA, and we talked about different ways of moving this forward. And Dr. Cavello brought up that now that she's assigned to both Albany County and Laramie County, there may be enhanced opportunities for collaborative service between the two counties, where we can help to accommodate the needs of people who are having mental health issues, but may not necessarily need hospitalization, but need a safe and stable place to be, such as Serenity House. I have a meeting on Monday with Sheriff Applehans to also identify areas of collaboration related to mental health. And then we will be meeting with Commissioner Gosar, since this is a county established committee and the city serves as liaison, then to begin to work out how we can best work together and what that's going to look like. So I think that ends my report, and I just want to say that a lot of things have been percolating for the last year, but moving forward, and the data that Dr. White has been working on is essential for the rationale that is necessary for writing these grants. They want to see the data, and there are certain things that they want to see. So she has worked to get that in place. We're in a good position to write further grants, and the Sheriff's Department has received $181,000 for critical incident debriefing, and they're continuing with their critical incident training as well as mental health first aid. So things are really moving forward, both with LPD and the Sheriff's Department and with University of Wyoming PD to better train officers how to deal with these events. And it's an ongoing process, and it looks like we are ready to start moving in to developing the crisis response team. And we're looking at that as starting as a pilot, and then working through any types of kinks that we find and fine-tuning it. But the work has been kind of quietly going on, but I think it's about to really pick up during the next year. So I wanted to give you a pretty thorough report in preparation for our developing our goals for the next year, and looking at goals about how we might participate. And we hope to have outside information about how we might best participate prior to our coming together for the retreat. And so that's the end of my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Cummey. That was that was a lot, but it's because there's a lot going on there. I can speak to, I think, at least one of your points, which is that I know that a lot of that work that you referenced is at the top of Chief Brown's agenda and is looking to start work on some of that in earnest now that he's been with us really for just a little bit over a month, but I believe he's well aware of that. And I know the city manager might have a few pieces of information to share on some of those topics as well. Go ahead, city manager.
Thanks, Mayor. I appreciate that update, and I would offer to the council that I did provide to you a full update on where we were with implementing all of the City Council's adopted goals for 2022. I think I provided that report in early November. The two goals that were mentioned here, which would be the goal for staff, for myself through staff, to evaluate crisis or mental health response alternative scenarios, and then also to establish a citizen committee to advise us with respect to police department operations. There was a report there on where we were with that. It is correct that I tabled those, frankly, to allow us to get our chief on board and hired to give him time to get his feet under him. The most important thing he can do right now is learn and understand how to effectively and adequately run our police department. I think we all agree on that, right? I will share with you that Chief Brown and I have had many conversations about how we will approach implementing both of those goals in the first quarter of 2023. Most recently, we spoke about it last Friday. And I would also note that if individual council members or groups of council members are planning to meet with Chief Brown on this, probably they should involve me in that. The direction was, in fact, to me to work through the chief to make those changes. So keep me in the loop, if you would. I appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Thank you, city manager. Appropriate reminder that, of course, the council works with the city manager in terms of working with the heads of the other departments and parts of the management team, which include the chief. I know we all know that, but it's always a timely reminder. As we've heard, council, certainly opportunities to start engaging and re-engaging on some of those projects. And I'd urge you to take a look at that report from the city manager as well about the implementation of those. I think it's all timely and working in tandem. So let's keep doing it. Councilmember Gabriel, I think you had an update for us.
Just a comment, Mayor, thank you. Speaking of mental health, I think the Winter Lights Festival at Washington Park would do us all very good. And I took that in the other day. It was just outstanding. I wanted to commend everybody involved, including, you know, Tough Guys Holiday Lighting, and then the collaboration with the city. I know they have local organizations on Friday and Saturday selling some treats and drinks. I haven't taken that in yet, but it goes through January 7th, open to 4 until 9 o'clock, and it is really outstanding. I think it'd be great for everybody to go by there and see. I hope they do. So just kudos to everybody involved, and thank you for the participation with, you know, Tough Guys to get that done, and it's really enlightening to see. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Gabriel. You know, the meeting we had last week, where you were only able to attend part of it, we had a announcement about that at the beginning of the meeting, and we had the somebody will have to help me remember the name of the individual from Tough Guys to come and talk to us a little bit about it. The council definitely expressed some of those same sentiments. It had been such a really good community-minded business and really took on a leadership role with that. And of course, we want to thank the assistant city manager for all that he did to kind of pull people together on that. But I agree, it's a great display. I found myself sort of wishing that whole park could be strung with lights. I don't know that we can really do that, but maybe some year we can go full Clark Griswold out there in Washington Park, because it's just really, really cool. I think it kind of encourages people to up their game with Christmas lights in the different neighborhoods too. You know, I took a drive around Laramie the other night and was looking at all the Christmas lights displays. We have some people really going all out. Some people are going, as I said, pretty Griswold with it, and other people just have kind of artistically done displays, and our town's good about that. Our town's really good about that, and it looks nice. But I agree with you, Councilmember Gabriel. Thanks for the comment on that. Anybody else have anything? Oh, Councilmember Cumby, yeah, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, don't just drive by Washington Park. Get out and walk around, because that's where the magic happens.
Yeah. Good advice. And I think, if I remember right, Assistant City Manager Feaser said that they had a renewable energy situation going on with powering our Christmas lights out there, if that's of interest to anybody, which is also cool. Okay. Well, I don't see anybody. Oh, okay, Councilmember O'Doherty.
Can I just remind people to shovel, if any of the public are listening, to not just shovel snow onto the wheelchair ramp at the end of their sidewalk, like to push out and to the side ideally, so it doesn't block drainage and doesn't form a lake. It's really a challenge in Laramie, but people remember what those ramps are for. And imagine if you were rolling down in a wheelchair and get to the pile of ice at the bottom of it, or the pile of snow. It's not helpful. So I think it would be nice for us to try to get that word out some more. Thanks.
I think it's a timely and appropriate comment and reminder. I remember at the beginning of this council term, I participated in this little exercise of trying to get around just downtown Laramie, a couple of blocks within City Hall, in wheelchairs with Mr. Burkett and a few other folks, and it was not easy. You can only imagine what it might be like in some of our other neighborhoods after a snow. So yeah, please, citizens of Laramie, as you do your walk shoveling, which many of you are very diligent about, also think about that curb and also the gutter. Curb and gutter. We always talk about it here at the City Hall. Curb and gutter, please. Okay. Well, I think we've about exhausted ourselves on a really good work session where we learned a lot about our ranch projects out there. I continue to just be grateful that the city was able to purchase our most recent acquisition there for water rights down the road, and also some of the other recreation opportunities and other things we heard about tonight. It's good stuff. I don't see anybody burning to talk anymore this evening about anything, so I sense that perhaps we should close the work session. And with that, I'd say goodnight. City Clerk, I'd ask you to hang on with me for just one more second, because I want to follow up with you about an email you sent me. It's nothing too top secret. It's about bios and stuff for the LUM group. The rest of y'all have a good evening. Or you can
Good night.